so thank you all for joining us tonight. And like I said before, it's really nice to see some familiar faces. It's so lovely to have this community that we've got growing. And that's really kind of what we're about at ECIS. You know, we've got 500 plus schools, and we're really just trying to have some impactful professional learning together, and build that community of learners. And I want to say now, before we kind of move on for the rest of this evening, is that generally, well, so far, the SIG group have been leading these Connect and Converse sessions. But what we'd like to see is us handing over the baton to you guys. So at the end of today's presentation, I'm going to share my email address with you. And if you've got any passions or special areas of interest that you could share with the early childhood community, please email me, because we're going to start planning our next round of webinars soon. Okay, so here we are. My name is Lynsey Briek, and I'm the chair of the Early Childhood Special Interest Group. And there's quite a few of us that are in the group, and we work together to help ECIS plan conferences and webinars and events like this for delegates to come and attend. So can I just ask my lovely colleagues on the SIG just to introduce themselves briefly, please? One at a time, go first.
I'm John O'Toole. I am a kindergarten teacher at the American School in London.
Hi, I'm Beatrice Moccia. I'm the assistant principal at the Leipzig International School, Germany, well, at the kindergarten, and I'm currently waiting for my baby to come to the world.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Rams. I'm the head of the primary at the British International School of Stockholm. Sorry, I'm sitting in the dark. I'm trying to do our Twitter feed at the same time.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophia Moros. I am at the American Community Schools of Athens as Director of Early Childhood, and I am delighted to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so let's get started. Oops, keep pressing the wrong button. So what is emergent writing? So obviously children from a very young age, I think my daughter was about 6 months old when she first started mark making, but they want to make marks. They want to
as much as you can manage, sweetie. Oh, thank you.
Can you just make sure you turn your microphones off, please? Thank you. But emergent writing is kind of like that next step on from initial mark making. So the next step on from exploration, where children are really trying to imitate the process of writing, and they may be using some sort of symbolic markings or drawings in this process, but the idea is that they're kind of communicating something. So they're trying to go from having the thoughts in their head onto a paper or speech onto a paper. And researchers have kind of identified that there are sort of 3 main domains for success in early writing, and those include conceptual knowledge, and generative knowledge, and procedural knowledge. So your conceptual knowledge is kind of including the function and purpose of writing. Procedural knowledge is about then the mechanics of writing, so letters and word writing, and that includes spelling and gaining alphabetical knowledge. And if you've missed it, Charlotte did a wonderful Connect and Converse on phonics, when you can find the recording of that on the ECIS website. And then generative knowledge is basically children, it's their ability to convey meaning. So basically translating thought into words, like I said, writing phrases and sentences eventually that convey meaning. There's kind of a general consensus that children progress through a series of stages as they develop. However, I think it's useful to say here that some children omit certain stages because they're all unique and wonderful. And some children have the amazing ability to be in multiple stages at once. And you'll probably be able to recognize that a little bit later on when we go through the stages. So yeah, really today we're going to talk about the what and then the why, and then we'll have a look at some of those stages and how we can support them. I think really as practitioners, what our jobs is to notice what stage our children are at and consider how we can support them best, whether that's through intervention or environment design. So just being devil's advocate here, hopefully this is going to work. Why on earth should we teach our children to write when, and if you've been following this with as much interest as I have, they have the technology to write whatever they want in the palm of their hands today as 4 and 5-year-olds. So if we project forward another 10 years when they're 14, why is it so significant for them to learn to write? So can you join me in thinking about the whys of why it's really important? If you scan, hopefully you've got a device, that QR code, you should pop up on a Slido page where you can put in some suggestions, some justification, some rationale for why you think writing is still an important skill for our children to learn. Hopefully you can see your ideas popping up on the screen now. So we've got where they can express themselves. It's for note-taking, communication. Yeah, it's linked to phonics, how we recognize and form letters. Therapeutic, indeed. It does help memory. Lots of people are writing fine motor skills. You can see that because it's getting bigger. Join society, that's a good one. It's so wonderful to see all those reasons why popping up on the screen. Sometimes I find as early years educators, we're often asked to defend our practices. So finding our why is really important. And of course, you know, on top of all these wonderful things that you're mentioning, there are links here to physical and creative development and emotional, social development and identity. So writing is still a really, really important skill for our young children. Thank you so much for adding all your ideas, and we'll save all of this and hopefully we can collate it and get it up on the website so we can see it as a resource. Okay, so the stages. So the first stage is the early stage, and it's a little bit about scribbling, really. Children's sort of drawings are their writing in the beginning. And years of research has really shown that young children's scribblings and drawings are kind of powerful modes for them to represent their ideas and their thoughts and their feelings. And children often make no distinction at this stage between the two. So when you ask them to write or draw, their drawing and writing, it tends to be one thing. And you see that quite a lot if you consider all the work that Reggio do in relation to the graphic language. We can see that meaning making comes from both drawing and writing for young children. And that's kind of further supported by all the great work that Katie Wood-Ray and Matt Glover do when they teach us that investing in children's drawing is investing in children's writing. So this scribbling stage, however, is kind of historically a little bit uncomfortable. So parents and some early educators tend to rush children through this stage. It's kind of seen as babyish, or the approximation at writing is sometimes not valued. However, John Matthews, who wrote the book The Art of Childhood and Adolescence, says that scribbles are really products of systematic investigation rather than haphazard actions. So children really do have intent when they're scribbling. At this stage, it tends to be a lot more about that action of mark making rather than always about speech or thought. So they tend to draw action more often. And at this stage, children who are drawing and scribbling don't yet understand, or not all understand, that writing is related to speech. And similarly, when you're reading them a storybook, they might not understand that the text carries its own meaning, and that the words you're saying as a teacher are where the story is coming from. So this is really a really early stage in sort of early literacy here. So how do we go about supporting that? Let's have a little look. So when we think about these early stages, really sort of permission and opportunity are the key things here. So children need to have that image of themselves as writers. And one of, I think, the most transformative trainings I ever had as an early years teacher was with Matt Glover. And he gave me a phrase which I use, I think, on a daily basis with children, which is 4- and 5-year-olds write like this. So when children first come into our setting and they are mark making in the ways that you can see on the screen, we give them permission to continue doing so by modeling that way of writing. So 4- and 5-year-olds write like this. And we would model that approximation at writing, whether it be scribbling or in a linear way across a line, depending on what we're seeing the majority of them are doing, we might nudge them towards the next step. So to build conceptual knowledge at this point, I'd be thinking about introducing bookmaking. Greg Bottrell has a training called the Message Center, which is really lovely, which is getting children to use symbols to send secret messages around the setting. And it's really impactful. It's particularly successful with boys. And maps, making maps at this stage of development is also a really good way to get children mark making and thinking about writing and getting writing tools in their hands. In terms of generative knowledge, we're trying at this point to get children to understand the connection between what is said and getting it on the page. So modeling a lot of thinking aloud and modeling a lot of writing, getting them to revisit what they have written, scribbled, annotated, drawn, and get them to read it like it's a piece of writing, generally valuing it as a piece of writing and getting them to come back to it. So sometimes when children, like the little boy up here in my class, have done some writing and I ask them to read it to me, I don't scribe on their writing because I don't want to devalue their approximation at writing, but I try to remember what they've said. And then I try to go back to it the next day so that they get the understanding that there is a constant there, that what they've written means the same and has the same intent behind it the next day too. Getting children to draw their theories at this stage is really important. So ask them to draw what they think thinking is, or if you're starting a new topic on color and emotions, you know, what draw me happy, those sorts of things, will get them understanding that they can convey meaning through drawing and mark making. And then in terms of procedural knowledge here, it's not particularly phonics based, because I think most of the things we're working on here will be about fine motor control. So using the tools to make meaning. And I think at this stage, it's really important that we understand how connected art is to expression. So they need lots and lots of protagonists for mark making in lots of different forms, lots of scales, lots of different surfaces. Right Dance is a wonderful tool that I was very lucky to be trained on in the Netherlands, which is kind of my second home. And that really helps children make gross movements into fine motor movements, getting ready for writing. And it's kind of a way of making those writing shapes without the pressure. Some of our children will already kind of come to us with a negative view, sadly, of mark making, and making it fun with ribbon dancing and scribble club and pen disco and all these sorts of things can help really get them mark making freely and happily without any idea that it's wrong, because sometimes they've been told scribbling isn't an okay approximation of mark making. Okay, so moving on to the middle stage, that's where we get some sort of symbolic exploration. So they understand that writing includes symbols, letters, but they probably don't yet understand letter sound correspondence. And they'll typically start at this stage sort of reproducing letters that they found in their names, or random symbols that they've seen all over the place, or numbers even. They understand that print carries meaning, but they still don't generally understand that letters represent sounds in spoken words in a kind of like systematic way. And although they may be growing in phonological awareness at this point, they haven't really made that connection of speech to print yet. So that's kind of where they are. All these lovely stages, by the way, have come from the National Centre on Early Childhood Development, Teaching and Learning. I've got the link to the website at the end, but that's got some great resources to help you in with professional development too. Okay, so how can we support children at the middle stage? Really, at this point, they kind of need to start understanding that print has a function. So having examples of functional print in your environment, like a helping hand sign, or having them sign in themselves, so that they understand that there are reasons that we write. They need sort of authentic opportunities to do that too. So having opportunities to mark make in role play and coming up with those ideas together with the children is really powerful. So if you're setting up a shop, ask them, okay, what do we need to write in this area, you know, so that they begin to understand that things have a purpose. Postcards at this stage tend to be really, really powerful for inviting children into writing. There's something about very small pieces of card that you can write on and then put in a post box that children find fascinating. So I would highly recommend that, or writing cards and sending them to old people's homes as a way to connect with the community is a really good idea. And of course, for their generative knowledge, they need now lots and lots of modeling of different ways to write and different reasons to write. Again, at this point, I would probably be introducing an alphabet chart and allowing the children to, and using that Matt Glover phrase, 4 and 5-year-olds write like this, picking up an alphabet chart and showing them the letters and saying, sometimes we use letters. But I wouldn't necessarily attach any phonics to it at this point, unless they were ready. I would just want them writing freely. And then again, in Greg Bottrell has the drawing club. If any of you get the opportunity to do that training, it's also really powerful because it helps develop a language for writing. So the vocabulary they need to tell stories or to retell is really focused on in those sorts of situations. And then having alphabet charts, typewriters, keyboards, and magnetic letters to explore will help build that understanding of symbols. Whoops, then wrong one. Okay, and the later stages. Sorry guys, I'm nearly done, I promise. So we're looking at letters here. And this stage, the children kind of understand and intentionally use letters to represent sounds. So they often start with the beginning sounds, moving on to those end sounds, and then throw in a few middle ones when they can hear them. And they're sort of now using inventive spelling, and then that leads on to the more conventional type spelling at the end. And at this stage in phonics, in writing, the children sort of can start to use some of that phonic knowledge, so we can start to nudge into getting them to stretch out when they're writing, if we feel that's developmentally appropriate. I know lots of us teach phonics at different times and different ages and phases. So supporting our children in the later phases. So in terms of conceptual knowledge, if we want our children to write and understand the purposes of write, they need a lot of exposure to texts that show them different ways to write. So it's an old book, but it's a great book. This Already Ready has lists and lists of read alouds that model different genres to children. And some of them are perhaps older books now, but they give you a good starting point to finding your own collections. Journaling. So you can see the little teddy with a book. One of the most beautiful ways that we can involve our families as well, I'm sure you guys have got more, I'm looking forward to hearing them later, is to send home a little book and try and get the children to journal what they do at the weekend. Obviously, again, we're trying to get them reading their writing and understanding at this point sort of concepts of print. Oops, sorry. And then a lot of work at this stage needs to go into oral planning. So talk for writing, storytelling, puppet play. And this is when you can really sort of teach through that small world provision that you set up, linking it to books and to story stacks. I love these little story dice. I think I got them from Tiger, and they were very, very, very cheap, but they're brilliant. And the children love making up silly stories because there's a poo. I don't know if you can see the poo at sideways, but they make the best stories. And then procedural knowledge is then again building that alphabetical knowledge now and nudging them to use the sounds they know, label everything, and we can begin to teach letter shapes and handwriting patterns. And now I say handwriting patterns, but I don't necessarily mean handwriting sheets. But I do think it's really valuable for children to get the shapes of letters into their motor memory so that they can write freely without having to worry about not knowing what letters look like. But again, we have to be developmentally ready for that. Okay, so I've talked far too much. So it's time for us to head out into breakout rooms and share all the wonderful knowledge that I know you guys have around emergent writing. So these will be our questions for today. The first one is, how do you foster a passion for writing in your setting? And the SIG thought here that it might also be really useful to think particularly about reluctant writers, because we all have them. There are challenges. So how do we entice those children to write too? Which resources do you recommend for inviting writing in fun, meaningful or unconventional ways? So we know children love novelty. So we're really looking forward to hearing some of the perhaps more unusual ways that we can entice children to write. And the big one, how can we engage and support our families in valuing children's writing practices? Like I said, sometimes we rush them through that scribbling stage because we don't like that approximation of writing. It's too far removed from adult writing. So how do we help our parents to value these stages and support us? Abby, are you there?
Yep.
How are we going to do the breakout rooms? Will you send us off?
Yeah, I can do it.
Super. So if you're in breakout room 1, then start with the blue one and go for number 1. If you're breakout room 2, can you go for the red one? And breakout room 3 for the green. How many rooms will we have, Abby?
I've had 5 rooms of 4 people right now.
5 rooms of 4 people. Perfect. So then group 4 can go for the blue question and group 5 can go for the red one, and then we'll come together and chat about it later. Is that clear?
Do you want to share the do you want us to share the Padlet link?
Oh yes, please. Will you share it?
Charlotte, are you there?
Thanks, Charlotte. So in the chat, you should see a link to the Padlet. And then when we go off into our rooms, if we do what we've done on previous times, where we elect somebody to write the responses into the Padlet and somebody who's prepared to come back and be the voice for the group and share for us when we come back together in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks, Abby. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I think everybody's back. Just have a little check down the list. See everybody. Oh, there's more cameras on this time round. That's nice. See all your beautiful faces. Okay, so we're going to kick off with group 1. So I think that's you, Lena. Do you want to feedback about what we discussed?
Yes, I can do that. So some of the things that we just threw out ideas of what we've done ourselves, and it was great sharing of ideas, actually. So we talked about writing journals, but not as a journal, not a daily journal, but where the kids can draw pictures and in the beginning just tell a story and then later try to add words to it themselves if they want to. And then they can see the progress of the whole school year, how they've been doing. We talked about bookmaking, inviting the kids to make their own books or have the books ready and stapled and give it to them so they can draw pictures and write words. Lynsey had a great idea about having utility belts with little pens and your markers and everything, so the kids who don't really like to write can have access to it all day long.
Strap them in.
Force them. No. We talked about non-permanent mark making, so writing on sand, writing in the snow, which we have. I'm in Oslo, we still have a lot of snow here, so painting on snow, writing in sugar and flour, shaving foam, and what else? Whiteboards with markers that you can erase, and then you mentioned the helicopter story, Lynsey. And that is acting out the stories, and is a brilliant website, which you should probably share the link to after.
Yeah, we will, absolutely. I'll put it in the chat in a sec. Thank you, Lena.
You're welcome.
Okay, can I have group 2 to feedback, please?
Okay, so for group 2, so we talked about modeling writing and having writing tools in role play and small world, indoors and outdoors, so that children can see someone doing it and they have an example in the classroom on how to do it. Then we talked about, because the resources that we want are inviting, meaningful, fun, and unconventional. So we were thinking of loads of a big variety of resources, sensory, so it can be using tools, but it can also using sensory like foams, natural and non-natural resources in the classroom. And for these resources to be inviting and meaningful, we were talking about a link with what they're doing in the classroom, so it can be linked to actions, write a word and then someone else draws it, or it can be journals or diaries in the classroom, or it can also be like recipes. So that's what we were thinking about. And then also we're talking about the variety of media to write on. So for example, writing on a horizontal, a vertical plan, on a tactile, erasable, natural, so again like sand, And for the tools, it can be like dough, pencils, pens, anything that they want to use.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to looking at this Padlet later and stealing loads of good ideas. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And can I ask group number 3 to feedback?
Yeah, we were talking a lot of things that have been mentioned already. We were talking about going with the children's interests, talking about like if there's a construction area that you can be having like different bits there, linking it into a lot of different role play areas as well. We also talked about maybe trying to have kind of like link with home as well. So if there's any writing that they're doing at home, making sure that you can also showcase that in school as well. We're saying that some people might have like wonder walls where they put work up for the children. And also we were talking about maybe celebrating like the small things with the children as well. So, you know, you don't have to write a book to be able to get praise. It's, you know, lots of like a little scribble or different things to be encouraging children a lot of the time. And also not just having it in the school, but like other people have said, using lots of different resources, going outside with it, and using it and making sure that you're having writing in lots of different contexts.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So we'll move on then to group 4. And I think we're back to the first question again. So that's thinking about, yeah, passionate.
We were group 4, so Islay just share. It's all good. Islay just share from group 4. So maybe you want to go back to group 3.
Oh, so group 3.
But thank you for sharing, Islay. That was great.
Sorry, we missed group 3. Is anyone there from group 3? Anyone?
I think group 3 got disbanded. It was only about 2 of us and we split up.
Oh, okay. So group 3 doesn't
I went to group 5.
Oh, okay. And we'll move on to group 5 then, please.
Hi. Group 5, we said many of the same things that I think it must have been group 2 who had the same questions about signing in and having lots of ideas of where it would be horizontal and vertical, giving those opportunities, just different writing, particularly on whiteboards or on different materials like shaving cream in the sandbox or things like that. One of my ideas was sometimes we draw pictures, and I love to draw and I can't. So the children get a great sense of humor over trying to figure out what it is. And then, so we make up a story about it, and then someone else might have that opportunity. And it ends up being quite a lot of fun when the person explains what it was supposed to be. Yeah. Other people you want to chip in from my group that no? Did I cover it most?
You got it.
Yeah, from group 5, Jyoti here. So Catherine and John both shared lovely ideas, and even shared something that I could use with my 3-year-olds. So being more hands-on, being more playful, using chalk not only on a board but on the sidewalks and whatnot. And then Catherine shared that the resources like those felt pens, the pens you all might be using there, and other things, not not designating one area to that to those resources the entire year, rather shifting them, giving them a feeling of newness every time to discover that and use it. And then again, John incorporated one more idea. He starts with a comic strip, so gives a brief idea, and he himself writes, or I think so draws a comic strip, starts with it, and then encourages the learners to go on with the story and the comic strip. And that is really fun when they share it with each other and stuff.
Yeah, that's wonderful. They love collaborative writing, don't they? It's super. I will share that link to Helicopter Stories as well, because it's a really good way of collaboratively storytelling and making up stories. And that story composure is really an important skill in emergent writing. If you haven't got a story to tell, then you can't write a story. So we've got to build all those language skills as well, haven't we? One thing I think is really important to mention as well is digital literacy. So opportunities for children to make in sort of digital spaces. Whether it makes us comfortable or uncomfortable, you know, it's here to stay. So I think it's really important that we teach our children how to use it responsibly and sensibly, and we teach them about the dangers of it too. But it is definitely a good way to entice those reluctant mark makers as well. We have these light up boards that look like iPads, but it's basically just a backlit board, and you write on it with chalk markers, and the children love them. So it doesn't give them the same freedom or access. It doesn't have the same dangers perhaps as an iPad, but it has the same appeal. And you don't have to be so precious with them either, so they can take them out and about. I think we've only got a few moments left, so I'm going to see if I can share my screen again. Okay. So this is being recorded, but I'll see if I can perhaps get some of these in the chat for you in a minute. But these are great books that I refer to. They're quite old, but they've been really valuable to my teaching practice over the years. And there's some links here to where I got some of those resources from. And I mentioned earlier that the National Centre for Early Childhood Development and Teaching, that website has lots and lots of pre-recorded PD you can do, and most of it for free. So that's a really useful resource.
I'll put the links in the chat, Lynsey.
Thank you.
Or
and coming up next, so I said earlier that we are going to try to start handing the baton out to different members of the early years community. So it's not just us that you see and hear, because we are wonderful people, and I don't want to offend anyone on my SIG right now, but we are by no means experts. You know, we're all generalists as early childhood educators, so some of us are more knowledgeable in some areas than others. So we're going to try and start sharing that baton. And Laura Venenza, am I saying that right, Bea? Or is it Laura?
it's Laura.
Laura Venenza. She is the kindergarten principal at Leipzig International School. So she works with Bea, and she's going to be leading our next Connect and Converse on speaking and listening skills. So I hope that you'll come to support her, because it's quite nerve-wracking doing these things. And I hope if you haven't already, you'll follow us on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn, whatever your thing is. And I said before, what we would like to do is really build this community of learners together. So my email address is there on the screen. Please email me if you are passionate about anything and you would like to hold a Connect and Converse session for this lovely community that we're building, so that you can share some of your knowledge and ideas and wisdom with us, and we can continue growing and learning together. There's a link there as well. The QR code goes to our Padlet, where you can just put in any ideas of things that you might like. So perhaps you don't feel brave enough to do a webinar, but you would actually like to have one on a certain topic. If you can put it in that Padlet for us, then we can look for people who are brave enough to speak and knowledgeable enough to help us out. So I just want to say thank you all for joining us, and I hope you'll join us again next time.
Thanks, Lynsey, for this wonderful session.
You're welcome. If anyone has any questions, feel free to fire away. But again, I don't position myself as a massive expert, but I will do my best. And if not, you're welcome to pop off and have a well-earned cup of tea.
I was going to ask if this is recorded, because I'd really like to share it with my colleagues.
Yes, it's recorded. And I think it'll be up on the website in a few days, won't it, Abby?
Yeah, I'll send it to everybody registered as well.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much.